Okay, so if you're here and you've clicked on this video, then you have absolutely felt the pain that I felt. No matter what you do, you just can't get your low end to hit. You're listening to the other reference mixes, you're listening to other people's productions, and you're thinking, what on earth are they doing to make their low end sound like that? Because whenever I turn my low end up, it just distorts, it's just farting in the speakers, it just sounds terrible. If you relate to any of what I just said, then this video is absolutely for you. Now, before I show you what the secret is, well, to cut a long story short, the secret is clipping, audio clipping. If you're not clipping your low end, if you're not clipping the things that have the most energy in your mix, then you're not getting loudness and you're not getting that weight. If you don't know about clipping, then I'll do my best to try and explain to you what it is. Essentially, when a sound level hits a certain point, let's say it gets to 6 dB, you might set a clipper to -5 dB. Now what's going to happen is it's just going to hard clip anything that was above -5 dB. It's just going to hard clip it and get rid of it. So ultimately you can have an absolute ceiling level. Now, why is this something that sounds great on low end? Because when you actually clip, the more you clip it, the more it actually adds harmonics and saturates the sound, which ends up making something sound much fuller and have much more life. And I'm going to try to break down why that is for you. But before I do that, I need to tell you a little bit about my process and how I like to actually set up my mix. I'm fortunate enough to be able to produce my own stuff, which plays a huge part in getting a great low end, because ultimately sound selection is really the foundation of a great low end. But I also have a mixing template that I produce into. So firstly, I like to have my drums, but I like to take the kick out of that bus. Why? Well, when you think about a kick drum, we often forget that it's referred to as a bass drum. So for me, if I'm thinking about the low end in my mix, that includes the bass instruments, but that also includes the kick drum. So I like to take the kick and the bass and put them in one bus. That way, if I want more low end in the mix, I can just turn that fader up. If I want less low end in the mix, I can turn that fader down. If I want to get more weight, I can EQ that bus, and I can just control the low end in one specific location. And when I think about drums, I think about transients, I think about articulation, I think about fast movement. And oftentimes a kick drum it's got a ton of low end in it, which causes a little bit of problems when it comes to compression, because the kick is going to trigger the compression way more. And even when you sidechain or add a high pass filter on the compressor, there's still a musicality that is lost in the way the compression is moving. So for me, I like to take the kick out of that bus and I like to compress, saturate all of my drum elements without that kick in there. This way, I can get way more saturation than I would be able to get if the kick was there. And also I can get away with way more compression than I would be able to get away with if the kick was there. And also a little secret sauce that I like to add is I like to add a transient shaper to my drums. And I can push that transient shaper way more aggressive on the drum bus when the kick isn't there than when the kick is there. Because if I push the transient shaper a lot whilst the kick is there, then it makes the kick just sound like this sharp, plucky thing that just doesn't have a lot of weight to it, which is great for EDM, but for the kind of hip hop, more urban stuff, you kind of want that full low end and you want the kick to absolutely smack. But rather than me just sitting there talking about this the whole time, let's actually get into the visual template on Logic Pro. Okay, so firstly, the way that I like to work is, as I said, I have the drums bus. So within here, I'll have all of my transient stuff, all of the fast information, the snares, hi-hats, all of that kind of stuff. And then I'll have my K and B bus. Can you guess what it stands for? Kick and bass. And within that K and B bus, I have a bass bus because sometimes there's multiple bass instruments. I like to have them all at a bus level so I can control them as one, or duck them against the kick as one. And then I also have my kick drum that's in that as well. And both of those go to this K and B bus, where I have this saucy plugin P44 Magnum that I'm going to tell you about in this video. So this is what that sounds like. And then after that, I love to have my music bus. So within here, I'll have all of my strings, all of my mid-range instruments, and any special effects risers and things like that as well. And then lastly, I have my vocals, which is a vocal bus. You can guess what's in there. So you get the gist. I have 4 buses essentially: vocals, music, kick and bass, and then also my drums. But today we're talking about low end. So we want to get into drums. Now, firstly, remember I said that hard clipping, what does it do? It cuts off the peak so nothing gets above a certain level. Now, if you look at this drum bus, pay attention to what level my drum bus is peaking at. So you can see it's peaking around minus 4.8 dB. But now pay attention to the level it's peaking at now. So you're thinking, what kind of magic is going on here? Because if you're hearing what I'm hearing, it actually felt like it got a bit louder, had more punch, had more attack and grit to it. But at the same time, it's only hitting minus 0.8. Now, why is that? Well, that is where this clipping comes in. Now, I love the P44 Magnum when it comes to clipping. I've replaced all of my other clippers with this one because I believe it absolutely is fantastic and sounds the best to me for the kind of sound I'm going for. It has a few things. It has oomph, which is like a high pass filter which has a resonant peak at its cutoff frequency. It also has poomph, which is interesting. Essentially what it does is it's creating a bell-shaped dip at the low end whilst also creating a boost at the frequency just next to it. So if you imagine like there's a dip like this and then there's a hump like this right next to it, and you can kind of move this up or down. And the reason that's powerful is because too much low end can make a saturator break up in a nasty way. So by actually reducing the amount of low end going into a saturator and boosting at a higher frequency point, you can actually get the feeling of more bass. That has that built in this one knob. And then it also has sweep. Now this does have the feeling and the sound of a transformer, adding that kind of warmness, smoothing off the top end. But for me, I like my drums to have that bite to them. So I'm just adding that back in with the sweep. And then in the middle, you have the saturation knob. But the most powerful part that we're talking about here is this clipper. I set this to -8. I know nothing's going above that. So that's how it sounds on the drums. Now let's pay attention to the level that my kick and bass bus is peaking at without this clipper engaged. So you can see that thing is peaking at minus 0.5 dB, which is unruly. Like I have no headroom left in my mix. But watch what happens when I engage the P44. I've got this set to -6, and listen to the difference this makes. Now, did you notice it doesn't go above -6, but I didn't lose any low end. I didn't lose any volume. But what I did gain was 6 dB. So what that means is by the time I come to my master bus, I gained 4.5 dB of headroom on my drum bus, and I gained 6 dB of headroom on my kick and bass bus, which means when I get to my master bus, all of those plugins, they're not working anywhere near as hard. They're not going to break up and distort and sound flabby. And ultimately, I'll be able to push this mix much louder while still having the power and the energy that this thing adds. And this thing can get gnarly. I mean, listen to this. I'm going to play with this saturation knob. Oh, bruv. I mean, now for some people that's too much. For me, I would even probably do that. Like, that's just my taste. That's what I love. But ultimately, this unit is so flexible. It's so powerful. It has different stages of oversampling here. Vintage is like ×2, I believe. Intel might be ×4. Then I think HD is ×8. 1 second. Let's pause because my wife's at the door. Zoe, I got made stuff for you. It's absolutely delicious. Oh my goodness. So ultimately, clipping is really the missing link when it comes to massive low end. And for me, the P44 Magnum by Pulsar Modular is one of the most powerful clippers, saturators, or just low end controlling, enhancing plugins out there, in my personal opinion. Now, this video, it wasn't the one-stop shop for everything clipping, but I wanted this video to essentially be a video that can point you in the right direction. If you're really struggling to get that fat low end, those huge kick drums, then start to research into clipping, different forms of clipping as saturation, and I guarantee your mixes are going to level up a huge amount and your productions are going to level up a huge amount as well. My name is Alex Elliott, and if you love this content, then make sure to like and subscribe and drop me a comment down below.